Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. On the programme this week, Lebanon attack renews fears of a full-scale war in the Middle East between Iran-backed Hezbollah and Israel. Plus, Central Europe faces its worst floods in at least 2 decades, leaving behind a trail of devastation. In an escalation of conflict in the Middle East, at least 12 people, including a child, were killed on Tuesday after communications devices used by Hezbollah members exploded across Lebanon. Hezbollah, backed by Iran and supporting Hamas militants in Gaza, blamed Israel for the attack and vowed to retaliate. A day after deadly pager detonations across Lebanon killed 12 people and injured nearly 3,000 others, many Lebanese were in a state of shock and disbelief.
What happened yesterday shocked us. It was unimaginable. No one could have thought that pagers could explode like that. The scene was shocking. How people were torn apart right in front of you.
Iran-backed Hezbollah has vowed to retaliate against Israel. The two sides have been engaged in cross-border warfare since the Gaza conflict erupted last October. Hours before the explosions, Israel's security cabinet said stopping Hezbollah attacks on the north of the country to allow the safe return of displaced residents was an official war goal. In Israel, residents had a mixed response to the blasts.
Israel should fight and fight hard until we have quiet here. So my kids will have a good life, not like ours.
It was a great thing, I think very clever, very focused, and I thank God that it happened. It's the time to punish the wrong people, the bad people, and the ignorant people.
I think well done to the army. Feels like finally the army are doing something to return all the residents of the north back to their homes. And may this be not the first, but definitely on our way to getting our country back to how it was.
While the war in Gaza has been Israel's main focus since the October the 7th attack by Hamas-led gunmen, fighting along Israel's northern border with Lebanon has fueled fears of a regional conflict that could drag in the United States and Iran. There have been almost daily exchanges of fire across the Israel-Lebanon border since the day after the start of the war between Israel and Hamas.
I was in Lebanon before coming to Emirates. I was visiting the United Nations troops in the border. When I came there, the level of danger was increasing, and I see the troops going to their barracks. Certainly, there is a possibility of the war be spilling over, not only to Lebanon, but also it's already being important fire in the Red Sea, where we, the European Union, has deployed a Navy mission in order to protect the freedom of navigation. The risk of a spillover is not from yesterday, it's from the beginning. And we have to do all our efforts in order to try to avoid the regionalization of the war in Gaza.
The United States said it was not involved in the explosions and did not know who was responsible, while renewing calls for a diplomatic solution to tensions between Israel and Lebanon.
Again, I don't have any details to provide on the reports of the pager blast. I can tell you, to my knowledge, there's no U.S. involvement in this at all. Again, it's something that we're monitoring. And in terms of potential escalation, I go back to what I said earlier in terms of a key focus for this department and the U.S. government writ large is on working with partners in the region, to include Israel, to prevent the conflict between Israel and Hamas from spiraling into a wider conflict. And that includes the tensions along the Israel-Lebanon border. And so we'll continue to strongly advocate for a ceasefire and the release of the hostages. And we'll continue to strongly advocate for a diplomatic resolution to the tensions that we're seeing along the Israel-Lebanon border.
Hezbollah fighters have reportedly been using pagers as a low-tech means of communication in an attempt to evade Israeli location tracking. Both Hezbollah and Hamas are prescribed as terrorist organizations by Israel, the UK, and other countries. The blast came hours after Israel's internal security agency said it had foiled an attempt by Hezbollah to kill a former senior Israeli security official using a planted explosive device that could be remotely detonated. Away from the Middle East conflict, Central Europe is grappling with its worst floods in 2 decades. The floods have wreaked havoc from Poland to Romania, destroying bridges, submerging cars, and leaving authorities and residents facing damages estimated to run into billions of dollars.
Standing in his home in southern Poland, Derek Kristan points to damage caused by severe rain and flooding. He says he and his 16-year-old son have no place to live.
There is nothing left. Tiles are destroyed. Floors are destroyed. Walls are overturned. You can see through the window. Walls are overturned. I have survived 3 floods in my life, but this one was the biggest one.
A nearby dam burst on Sunday, submerging the historic Polish Spa town, as well as nearby towns and villages. Border areas between the Czech Republic and Poland were also hit hard over the weekend. Heavy rain and surging water levels have forced evacuations and left a trail of destruction, as well as a rising number of deaths. It's the worst flooding in over 2 decades. The flooding has revived fears of a repeat of the catastrophic 1997 floods that claimed 54 lives and forced 162,000 people to evacuate in Poland and the Czech Republic. On Monday, Poland's government declared a disaster in affected areas and said it had set aside $260 million to help victims. Rivers were still bursting their banks in the Czech Republic, while the River Danube was rising in Hungary, and parts of Austria and Romania have also been inundated by floodwaters.
I've never seen flooding like this. We're on a cruise and we're stuck for days where the boat's not even moving. So I don't know how you do it.
It's very bad. I haven't been here for very long, but the fact that the roads are closed and the bus system is all shut down practically, and I have to find another way to get home is stressful, but I hope it calms down soon.
Experts say more needs to be done regarding adaptation to climate change in Europe, as floods will become more frequent in future.
And the mechanisms here are clear. Europe has for decades been warming at a much higher rate than the rest of the world. Warm air holds more moisture, and what goes up will come down, and we see these extreme rain events. And we'll see more of this as we go forward. These have been branded now as historic floods, and that's correct. Nothing to disagree with there. But climate change has a way of moving the goalposts. So soon we will be talking about these kind of events as frequent or even annual as we go forward. Across particularly Poland, Czechia, and Austria, we've seen loss of life. We've seen power outages, big evacuations, transport disruptions, damage to infrastructure. And thousands of people are evacuated, and hundreds of thousands affected by all the impact of these floods. So a very dramatic picture across the board.
Meanwhile, while one part of Europe is underwater, another is going up in flames. On Tuesday, at least 3 people were reported dead in wildfires across Portugal. More than 1,000 firefighters in the central regions were racing to save homes from the blaze, with help arriving from France, Greece, and neighbouring Spain.
In Bangladesh, recent devastating floods have affected over 5.5 million people, with many in urgent need of food, clean water and medicine. As floodwaters slowly recede, relief efforts from both government and private organizations remain limited, leaving some remote areas still without aid.
Villagers in Bangladesh wade through deep water to get to safer ground as severe flooding triggered by relentless monsoon rains continues to inundate parts of the country. Dozens of people have died and more than 5.5 million have been affected.
More than 5.5 million people have been affected by floods. And over the year, over 2024, more than 18 million people have been affected by floods and by cyclones. Millions of people have seen their lives disrupted.
Farmer Abdul Halim is one of those affected. He and his family fled their mud house days ago when a 10-foot high wave ploughed through their village. The 65-year-old recently returned alone to see what he could salvage.
The water receded for a while, but it is increasing again. It is now becoming a major headache. Where will we get food? Where will we stay? It is a big problem.
Many of the displaced have no food, clean water, medicine, or dry clothes. There's been little relief, especially for those in more remote villages.
This is the shelter in Noakhali, Lokhinarayanpur, and this is a school, and 170 families are residing in this shelter, and that is the ongoing SRH camp, and there are huge need. I met a couple of women and girls, and they are having so many problems, and they came only one clothes here, and they left their house. They didn't know that flood is coming, and they were not at all prepared for this.
According to authorities, more than 400,000 people from 11 flood-hit districts have taken refuge in around 3,500 shelters. They say medical teams and the military are assisting in rescue operations, but blocked roads have hampered their efforts. Bangladeshi officials have declared the floods to be the country's worst climate disaster in recent history. Climate change is increasing the frequency, severity, and unpredictability of cyclones, floods, and other extreme weather events affecting Bangladesh. The floods are the fourth major climate-related disaster to hit the country this year. Since the end of May, nearly 13 million people across about a third of the country have been impacted by Cyclone Remal, floods in the northeastern and northern regions, and now the flash floods in the southeast.
As heavy seasonal rains sweep across Sudan and its neighboring countries, vulnerable communities are being pushed to the brink amid delays in humanitarian aid. This comes after more than a year of deadly conflict that has now led to famine conditions in the region. The devastation caused by extreme flooding ravaging South Sudan is easy to see while navigating the treacherous road to Beryl. Entire communities have been wiped out, their homes have submerged in rapidly rising waters, and their few salvaged belongings are scattered across whatever high ground they can find. Not only are these communities coping with their own crisis, but they're also trying to accommodate thousands of displaced people arriving from neighboring Unity State. This is fueling tensions over access to limited resources.
Over the years, the relationship between the two states is not all that good in terms of peace. There has been rampant, cattle raiding and revenge killing, along our common border. And we in Lagos State, we have managed to bring peace among our communities. Lagos State is now peaceful, but that peace is not complete if we are not peaceful with our neighbors. So we are reaching out to our neighboring communities so that we have peace across our common borders.
The rains and floods across South Sudan and its neighbors, Chad, Sudan, and Libya, are pushing vulnerable communities to the brink and delaying the delivery of vital humanitarian assistance. In the transit camp in Rank, South Sudan, heavy rains and flash flooding has displaced around 4,500 people, destroyed property and livelihoods, and compromised water and sanitation systems. It has also delayed onward transportation of new arrivals from transit centers and delayed vital food pre-positioning.
It's the height of the rainy season and millions of people are affected across Chad, Sudan, and South Sudan. Heavy downpours are also making it extremely difficult for WFP to transport assistance across flooded and muddy roads. But we are getting trucks into war-torn Darfur every single day for hundreds of thousands of people at risk of famine. But we need maintained and expanded access so that we can ramp up our assistance, save lives, and prevent famine from spreading.
Above average rainfall is forecast until September, with a high risk of devastating floods in Sudan and South Sudan. Some forecasts warn that flooding in Sudan could surpass the historic 2020 floods that hit Khartoum. Since April 2023, Sudan has been embroiled in a deadly conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Thousands of people have been killed, and some 12 million people have been forced to flee their homes.
Sudan's conflict has so far killed more than 20,000 people. This is an underestimate, by the way. Displaced over 10 million people inside the country and forced another 2 million to flee to neighboring countries. This is the largest internal displacement of people in the world today. The conflict has left some 25 million people, more than half of the country's population, in dire need of humanitarian aid. Of these, 14.7 million require urgent assistance for a range of life-saving support, for which the humanitarian sector has requested $2.7 billion, which is less than half funded. But we must focus on all people in need, all 25 million people. And this means additional resources are required to meet their needs. And we are calling on the world to wake up and help Sudan out of the nightmare it's living through.
Both sides in the conflict have been accused of abuses, including war crimes.
Over 16 months on, the conflict in Sudan continues to spiral out of control. Civilians bear the brunt of hostilities between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces and respective allied armed movements and militias, conducted with total disregard for international law. Indiscriminate attacks and the use of weapons with wide area effects in densely populated areas have resulted in thousands of civilian casualties, in the destruction of vital infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and markets, and the decimations of sources of livelihoods.
The conflict began when competition between the army and the RSF, which had previously shared power after staging a coup, fled into open warfare. And in the Caribbean, communities are still reeling from the devastation of Hurricane Beryl, the Category 4 storm, the most powerful recorded in the Atlantic in June, left widespread destruction, flattening homes and destroying livelihoods. In the rural farming community of Belmont, the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl is a stark reminder of nature's unforgiving power. 56-year-old farmer Carol sits amid the remnants of her home after losing everything she has built over the past 3 decades.
I stand up and watch the shop top lift off, zinc fly, and plenty rain, but we scared. Even though I experienced it, this is the 3rd experience from Gilbert, but the 2nd taking off the roof. Yes, and we watch and watch still. Couldn't wait until in the morning.
She now lives with her sister, her 2 children, and her granddaughter, solely relying on family support.
The main concern for the future, just getting back the building. Yeah, just getting back up the building. That my grandsons can, and my daughter and myself, we can move back together.
Hurricane Beryl, a Category 4 storm, made landfall on the 3rd of July, leaving a trail of destruction across Jamaica's agricultural heartland. Farmer Nakaya also lost his livelihood, including 100 chickens that provided for a 67-year-old mother who suffers from Parkinson's disease. Now, with only the walls of his house standing, he's determined to rebuild and seek support.
The climate changes now. You don't even know when you're gonna get a hurricane. One time you could say, yeah, this season is just rain or whatever, but no.
Also recovering is Carriacou, a small paradise island in Grenada, which was also devastated. The hurricane's impact was so severe that entire villages were wiped out, leaving many communities still living in shelters or with relatives.
So the last 2 weeks, what we've been doing is, because Carriacou have got a very aging population, they can't clear out their houses themselves. So we've got teams of the guys from Carriacou, which is actually moving everything, sweeping everything out and denailing, getting ready for the new roofing material.
We will be delivering shelter trainings in various topics so we can help the local population to learn, recover and prepare for future disasters which unfortunately hits this region very often.
The island remains in a state of emergency, with efforts to restore power to remote areas expected to take weeks.
Have you ever?
The government, local and international organizations are collaborating to provide essential services and support rebuilding efforts. However, they face significant challenges in logistics, resource allocation, and rebuilding to withstand future hurricanes, especially with the peak of hurricane season approaching. And that's the program today. But remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Tenyola Oyetayo. Bye for now.